one and I stand on that. You and me, babe, that's black on black.
Speaking of history, I was watching Lawmen, Bass Reeves. I was catching up last night. Have you seen this on Paramount
No,
Plus?
what
And
is
this
it?
is not an ad. I just watch TV. I'm grateful that Paramount Plus came through with an ad a few times. I don't think they're ad. Let me just look through real quick. No, they're not
Oh yeah,
advertising
this
today,
dude.
but they don't have to because I'm gonna talk about it anyway. Um, I when I first discovered Bass Reeves was the real Lone Ranger, I was so proud, because it was like black man. There was no Tonto. It was a Native American, indigenous person, but he was black. Yes. And now watching it and the history of it makes him so complicated. Oh
Mm.
my goodness. So so it's like, I think it's going to be like 8 parts. Part 7 I watched last night. And I'm not giving away too much, but the opening scene in Lawman Bass Reeves, he's on the battlefield. It's the Civil War. I made an assumption that he was fighting to end slavery. No, he was actually on the other side, fighting with his master against the Union. So that sets the framework automatically, right? Where what you think you know about Bass Reeves gets flipped on its ass. But without
Wow.
talking too much about the details, last night I watched an episode starring Tina Lifford, who might have been in an entirety of 5 minutes but lit the screen up. So shout out to her. Those of you who watch Queen Sugar, Aunt Vi from Queen Sugar. She was on that screen for 5 minutes and set it off. Tina Lifford, shout out to you. But in this particular episode, there was a question posed to him, or it wasn't a question. It was he was being asked. He was called a slave catcher because he was a lawman. He was going gathering up people, and not all of the people were outlaws. And so it got me thinking about history and how we examine who's the good guy and who's the bad guys. Even with the cowboys and Indians, we've always been taught that the Indians were scalping, but then you think y'all came and stole land and then killed people and genocide, and they're not supposed to fight back. Like, and fighting back makes them the enemy. Our whole trajectory of how we see our country and the world is through a lens of storytelling that is not necessarily true. So we have to examine everything. And I was leaning in last night because I don't like Bass Reeves as a result of what I'm watching. I'm like, I don't think he's the hero I thought he was. He was locking up black people. Come on, man. What are you doing?
But
Or sending black people to their death and saying, right after slavery, because he was enslaved, he even had a brand of his master on his back. And you think about someone who was enslaved. So there was a lot of things that I was dealing with in walking through this. And I wanted to share this with you in the audience, and I'm going to put out the number 866-801-8255. If anyone else is watching Lawman, Bass Reeves on Paramount Plus, I would love to get your opinion. But there were 2 things that stuck out. First of all, Bass Reeves had a bunch of kids. His oldest daughter she might have been born enslaved, but she was not enslaved, right? So the first generation after enslavement, you saw a large number of people run for office and win. So it was one of the largest number of black people in Congress and the Senate. I think there was even a lieutenant governor right during that little period of Reconstruction. Black people were branching out and forming communities and starting whole towns. We know about Rosewood and Greenwood and Eatonville and all these other towns, Mound Bayou and Mississippi. But this was the beginning because these are the same people that built this country. So it was natural for them to go out and have even, post offices and things like that. But his daughter was not enslaved, and and being raised in isolation on this farm, the interaction now with white people who were angry white people who were angry that their way of life has been taken from them. She didn't have the same deference to white people that her parents might have had. So she gets into a little thing, but I think about it in the same way that I think about the civil rights movement. Those of you who have grandparents or parents who went through the civil rights movement, you weren't raised the same way to be afraid. And in many ways, you didn't want your children to be exposed to the horrors of racism. So you might have protected them from the way Bass Reeves' daughter in this depiction of it was protected. So when she encountered a white person, she was like, excuse me, little girl, what are you doing? And was, belligerent, not belligerent, but like, you gonna respect me. And it didn't turn out well because white people gonna be, racist white people are brutal and soulless. So I was just thinking about that, that we can kind of like, I wonder how many enslaved people did not imbue this spirit of fear in their children after enslavement, because there was this reconstructive period. There was this period of freedom and wealth. I mean, you think about Robert Church and them, senior, and how there were some people in North Carolina, Wilmington, that were actually thriving after slavery. And then came the Night Riders and D.W. Griffith and this whole kind of demonization of black people and the carte blanche and the patty rollers that became police. I was just thinking about that last night as I was watching it, how we raise our children. And in this world right now, how are you raising your children as it relates to, everything?